Well, can you all see the PPT?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So basically today we'll be focusing on Indian diaspora. The crux of the discussion would be the trends of this Indian diasporic community, their movements, how could they, the history as to why they had to move out, what was the cultural patterns that they took up after they moved out. And in this context, I'll just give a brief introduction from the ancient times. You will see that Indian migration, especially in Southeast Asia, it we have seen it since the ancient times. Early Indian migration has not led to permanent settlement overseas. What I'm talking about right now is about the ancient times, and during the ancient times, you will not see that people went out and they completely settled themselves there. They went out for a period and they all came back. And if at all they did move out, they got completely assimilated in the host societies. We couldn't find a trace of their origin of a different ethnicity in the host societies. For there is an example of these Chinese immigrants. Chinese, they started immigrating right from the very beginning, and you know they could move out to Southeast Asian countries, and they completely mingled their identity with the host society. They married, they got themselves married, and they never looked back. So either they came back or they got completely mingled. There was no existence of what you say of their ethnicity in the host society in the ancient times. And you can see that the modern immigration that took place, it was mostly the result of colonialism or some kind of an external force. Mostly it was colonialism in most part of the world. And you will see that slavery was abolished in 1834, and there was a massive demand for labor in all the plantation sites.
Ma'am, just a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah.
Ma'am, if you want to use Odia language also, you can use, because students you can use both the language.
Okay, and I would request the students to, you can speak up. You can just ask me to repeat or use Odia language if things are not intelligible to them. You just stop me and you can ask me to repeat in Odia. If at any point of time you feel that things have not been properly communicated to you. Okay. Okay, so when I'm talking about these plantation sites, you will see that it was especially the Britishers who were employing this Chinese labor, and this practice they followed from Latin Americans, because prior to the Britishers, it was the Latin Americans who used to, employ Chinese laborer, and Chinese laborer were popular in, migrating everywhere. They had these early migrating genes, and they had a massive population, so labor was never a problem in their country, and wherever they found opportunity they could move out. And in the early part they mostly moved out because of trade, and later on as workers, plantation workers. And if you look at Indian laborers, they were mostly engaged in public work. By public work, I mean, construction of roads or railways, whatever work that was taken up by this colonial imperial government. It was mostly the Indian laborers who used to, help the state in taking up these works. And if you look at the scale of immigration, it took place during the British imperialistic period, when the British completely, what you say, they established themselves in India. They started using Indian laborers in other colonies as well. And Indian immigration to Burma, it increased with British capture of Burma, because once the British captured the Irrawaddy Delta, that was an important entry point to Burmese territory. They opened up the passage for all Indian laborers to work there. For Odia, migrants also. Rangoon has always been a favorite destination. I mean, jitale dadana shramikon kotha kahu, Rangoon. They used to travel to Rangoon, and it was a favorite destination for most of these manual laborers. So Burma was one of the most earlier sites of emigration for Indian laborers, and you will find that Indian emigration around the globe was mostly because of British imperialism. Leaving a few exception of French and Dutch colony where you see in Reunion Island or Suriname in Latin America, rest was all because of British Isles. You might have heard this statement that the sun never sets on the British Isle. Why the sun doesn't set in the British Isle? Because from east to west, from north to south, everything was under the domain of British rule. So 90% of the globe had come under British control. So that is the reason, the sun would be setting at one point of any territory. So the sun never, that it is this famous phrase goes that the sun never sets on the British Isles. So, they started, scattering these Indian laborers to different parts of the globe, wherever they had their colonies and wherever they believed that a good profit can be earned. So it was just in few, rare places like Suriname and this Reunion Island where Dutch and French colonies, they helped with the help of Indian laborers. And one of the important, what I will say, schemes of engaging labor during that period was the indentured labor system. And what is this indentured labor? An indentured laborer, if you try to define it, is under contract to work for a specific period of time, for either for a person or for a corporation. And in those days, it was not for money. They were not paid on monetary basis. In lieu of their services, they were either provided accommodation, food, and other essentials. And it often involves passage to a new country. They will land up in a new country, and after completing the term of the contract, it used to be 4 to 7 years during those period. And after those 7 years, 4 to 7 years period, the contract that they have signed or they have put their thumb mark on, they were set free. But during this period of time, the labor was considered to be the property of the master. He could be sold away to another master if the master wants to. He will not be allowed to marry without the consent of the master. It was not only he was controlling his labor or his skills, it was the slave, the laborer was the complete property of the master. His all personal, even decisions were taken up by the masters. So unlike slave, he had the right to go to the local magistrate if he was badly treated. During the time of slavery, the slaves were not even allowed to do that. But at least the laborer, this indentured laborer, they could visit a local magistrate. And after the completion of the term of the labor was completely, paid what they said freedom dues. It was mostly in form of land or sugar or in form of any product, and they were also given the chance to become an independent farmer or a free laborer. If the laborer wanted, he can join any other master of his choice, or he could become an independent farmer if he has accumulated enough land or enough money as a freedom due. And mostly the labor would need goods and services which were not included in the term of indenture. There would be certain essential goods and services that the laborer would be requiring, and if he tries to seek those services or those goods from the master, his period of indentureship would be extended. And that was the case. When these laborers left from India, they could never come back. And here we will just try to look at some of the migration patterns of this is only in case of Indians. We have this information that we are trying to discuss right now is about the Indian migration and the Indian diaspora community. So if you look at the migration pattern of Indians, you will see that it can be divided into, three phases. The first phase, it starts from 1834 to 1950, and here you will see that there was a steady increase of indentured labor, either to Burma, that is the present day Myanmar, Ceylon, or Malaysia. The second phase starts from 1916 to 1920, and this phase was, somehow it coincided with the World War, and it led to the end of indentured labor in 1970. Then you see the third phase. The third phase starts in 1921 to 30. Here, emigration, it mostly led to plantation sites like Malaysia, Ceylon, Burma for rubber, tea, and rice, respectively, because these were the places where these products were grown. And you will see that during the time of depression that came up around during the 1930s, most of the Indians, they returned home. And by this time, Indian public opinion regarding immigration was too critical, because there were cases of, ill treatment on the part of the laborers. That the laborers were being ill treated by the masters. They were being beaten up, or they were denied the basic rights. They were denied food. So, there was a growing, rising public opinion against immigration, and people were, completely against it, because that was leading to some kind of human rights denial. But after the Second World War, you will see that the immigration pattern got a new shape. Till now, the kind of immigrations that we have been talking about was for manual laborers, the working class, who used to, who for whom it was just a distress migration. They had no opportunities left out here, so they had to migrate. But things started changing after the World War. After the World War, you will see that it was mostly the skilled, educated professionals who were, migrating, and they were migrating to the industrialized West, that is, countries like United States of America, Great Britain, Canada. So, the highly industrialized nations, they were in great demand for these skilled workers or professionals, and this was popularly tagged as brain drain. There are many reasons for migration. You will see that uh, if if you remember, in my last class, I was talking to you about modernity. How, with the coming of modernity, this entire idea of colonialism is nothing but, an end product of modernity. And we always relate the emergence of modern period, the modern times, with three revolutions, as I told you last class: the industrial, the French, and the Enlightenment. And it was during the industrial revolution that, there was a great demand, because the domestic markets were not enough, not enough to provide resources or raw materials for the running of industries. And at the same time, the Britishers, they needed a global market for dumping their products. They needed raw materials that could be collected globally from its colonies, and they needed a global market which, the colonies could actually, place before the imperial Britain. And I told you yesterday also that the experience of modernity was different. The European experience of modernity and the Indian experience of modernity is completely, drastically opposite to some extent. When I say, how do you characterize modernity? Modernity has, I'll give you, it's not a part of a, it's not there in your material, but it's important, because if you don't understand these nuances, it is very difficult to pick up, as to why immigration started in India. There are a few reasons. You will see that modernity has certain characteristics like, it's a phase, it's a historical phase that restructured the world completely. And we look at modernity from three different dimensions: socially, economically, and politically. If you talk about economics, you will see that the industrial revolution transformed the economy of the globe completely, because it was marked with capitalism, it was marked with industrialization, it was marked with mass production and mass consumption. Politically, the idea of yesterday we were discussing nation states and nationalism. Modernity was the time when nationalism emerged. So your entire idea of freedom, equality, citizenship, these are all, they go under the realm of political modernity. And when you talk about, other aspects of modernity, the very idea of freedom, the very idea of tolerance, the very idea of, accepting the other, somebody who's not like you, these are all features of, a modern society. So when I try to make a comparison between the European modernity and the Indian modernity, I told you that in European modernity, industrialization was a feature of modern society. These are symptoms as to how do you identify whether a society has attained modernity or not. We'll try to look for these symptoms as to whether that society is industrialized. Okay, it has a democratic government. So these are, some of the features how as to how we identify modernity. But the things were completely different in case of India. When the rest of the Europe was undergoing industrialization as an outcome of modernity, in our case, we never had any industrial revolution, we never had any French Revolution, or we never had a, we had a cultural renaissance, but that was of a different kind and of a different dimension. So when I'm talking about Indian modernity, you will see that we underwent a process of deindustrialization rather than industrialization, because our modernity came was colonially mediated. It was only with the advent of Britishers that we experienced modernity. So it was, a sudden collapse with modernity. It was a sudden accidental thing. It never came to us in a gradual manner as it happened in the West. So when I'm talking about these modern phases, the situation, the very idea of understanding Indian modernity, it was quite complex, because, we couldn't draw parallels with the idea of Western modernity. There was, deindustrialization. When, secularism is also an aspect of one of the features of modern societies. But you see, in case of India, when we attained independence, we also witness partition. So in our case, nationalism and communalism went hand in hand. But mostly nationalism is associated, secularism is associated with modernity. For us, it was nationalism as well as communalism. It was not secularism. It was deindustrialization. So, as a subset of deindustrialization, we could actually point out certain features that led to immigration of these Indian laborers. And here you will see that, there were a few reasons as to why we have to, talk about Indian modernity. Uh, one of the reasons being, uh, what you can see from the slide is the disgrace of the peasantry of those times. If I also told you yesterday that uh, the Britishers brought about both a structural and a cultural change in India. Structural change came with certain new policies, land policies, forest policies. So, they, if you look at the case of Odisha also, when the Permanent Settlement Act was levied here, and we were actually, it laid the peasants in a very distressed condition. You will see that these new land policies, they were completely, they were going hand in hand with capitalist development. And by the middle of the 19th century, you will see that, the entire administrative setup had changed. The company had fixed the land taxes at 90% of the rental in Bengal and over 80% in rest of the northern part of India. Hello? Yeah. So the distress of peasantry, it led with the introduction of the intermediary systems, that is the Jamindari system and the Rayatwari systems that we talk about. And the taxes that was levied on the peasants, it was too much. You know, there would not be any production, and apart from that, the British government brought in certain structural changes as to deciding what crops or what products they should go for, even if it would not be beneficial for the farmers, even if the farmers would be knowing that these kind of, if they grow these kind of products, it would lead to barrenness of land. But these things were forced, imposed on them, and it was leading to a kind of pauperization of the peasantry, the marginal peasantries and the landless laborers. And at the same time, you will see that you know it was a period when India was experiencing widespread famines. If you can remember, in Odisha also we had this Nankha Durbhikya, what we say, in 1865, if I'm not wrong. So that was that was an age where we were undergoing a phase of extreme misery when it came to the rural population and the small cultivators, and the frequency of famines were going up after 1860. And the last 4 decades of the 19th century, you will see that there was a massive decline in food production, and food prices rose like anything. So whenever there is a famine, it's very difficult on the part of the state to manage things, and most of the deaths that is created, it's mostly man-made. Man-made in the sense, it's the scarcity is because of mismanagement, and also there was shortage of, you will see that that was a period when we were actually experiencing these new kind of phenomena, and it was completely new for us to adjust to such a situation. So this led to a volume of immigration, and there was a flow during this period because there was nothing to eat, and people were in a state of absolute poverty, and the peasantry had completely failed with the new settlement, the new land policies, and you have famines, and you have to pay heavy tax to the government even if there is a famine, even if there is a drought. So you're not left with any choice. And not only that, it was not only just the case of agriculture. The state of Indian industries, what you say, the handicraft industry or the cottage industries, was even more, they were also in a poor state of affairs, you can see there. You will see that, it was during the 17th century that India was considered to be a great manufacturing power because of its handicraft industry. Indian cotton, Indian silk, muslin, these were, they were very popular in Europe and rest of the world. The cotton industry especially, it was, they used to export their products to all parts of Europe and Asia. So that, we had these traditional urban centers, not the newer ones, the older urban centers like Muzaffarnagar, Varanasi, they were these trading centers. And as the British cotton industry was completely, during that point of time, they were unable to compete with the Indian counterparts, and they had the industrial revolution going on back home. All they needed was, what they did, they took away the raw materials from India, and they used to dump it in their industrial belts, and they used to bring finished products here. So when you make a comparison between machine made products and handicraft products, the machine made products would be cheaper, and gave a severe blow to the Indian handicraft industries. And especially the most important thing was the prohibition on use of those raw materials, the states' policies were such that there was not a we never got a free hand to use any products. As I told you, for example, in case of a carpenter who would be procuring woods from the forest, and the Britishers come up with the Forest Rights Act, where they deny everyone from entering into the forest. That will be severe blow to his industry. So that was the case, and you will see that. You know, by 18th century, Indian goods were prohibited entry into England because they wanted the Indian industrial industries to, have a stunted growth, or, the way the entire things were reorganized and restructured, it led to a process of deindustrialization, as I told you. So during the 19th century, you find India was importing cotton. India, that used to be a center for exporting cotton globally, and that to world-class cotton, it became soon an importer of cotton. And that was about handicraft industry. And if you talk about other industries, you will see that things were in a very deplorable condition. You might have heard that even Odisha had a very flourishing salt industry during the ancient and medieval times, and it used to export salt to other parts of the world. But it was only with the arrival of these colonial forces that these things were abandoned, because the salt law was passed, where they were denied every human being who had a natural right to make salt, because hello, could you just mute your microphones? In case you have any question, you can ask. Santosh sir, could you just mute your microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you will see that there were these what I was trying to say, that the indigenous industries were facing a setback, and
Ma'am,
yeah,
what are you telling?
no sir, the microphone was on.
Okay, fine. I will put up.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that they gave a complete setback to the indigenous industries, be it handicraft industries or any other form of industries. And our slowly you will see that our traditional industrial belts, they were completely abandoned, and we started having new colonial cities in the form of Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and Delhi. Delhi, because it has always been the capital of India since the ancient and medieval times. And if you look at rest of the capital cities, they were all port cities. Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and it was easier for these colonial rulers to to uh, send resources by sea route to England, and that was the reason primacy was given to these new colonial cities which were in the making, and in fact industrialization was completely ruined with the arrival of Britishers. And then there were certain other factors also responsible for that. It was things like seasonal unemployment, mass illiteracy. Then we were always used to caste-bound traditional occupation. So if I do not, as suppose I am a Brahmin, and I want to take up the trade of shoes, I would be prohibited, because my caste doesn't allow me. So that led to unemployment and poverty, and and the scenario was already very bad, with famines and droughts coming up, with decline of these handicraft industries, and the distress of these small peasantry. So there was no option left out for these Indians, especially the laboring class, who had to go out, who had to migrate in search of food. And interestingly, you will see that in case of this indentured labor system, they were given the basic essentials. It was not even money that they were promised. Usually, land is a very big thing for Indian during those times. So that was one of the allurements, and the basic thing, the push factor was that we had nothing left behind. We had nothing to eat. Also, at least it was a survival, you know, thing for Indians of those period. Now, looking at the patterns of immigration, what were the different patterns of immigration? I'll try to, you know, tell you. If you look at your course also, I'm referring to the material that is given in your course. It talks about 5 distinctive patterns of immigration. One is indentured labor immigration. What is this indentured labor immigration? It is, I already told you it was a contract by the migrant worker, either with a person or with a corporation, and the term usually varied from 3 to 5 or 7 years. And they had to perform a specific task for a specific wage, and at the end of the contract, the laborer was free or was free to re-indenture to work elsewhere or to return back. So after 10 years, he was entitled to a subsidized return passage. And as I told you earlier, that the migration of Indian indentured labor, it began in 1834 with the abolition of slavery. There was an abolition of slavery, and that was the reason the scheme of indentured labor started. And the chief importing countries of this period was Fiji, South Africa, Mauritius, Malaysia. And here you will see that during the first phase of these endangered immigration, mostly they were trying to recruit tribals, tribals from, if you can see, from Chota Nagpur Plateau, and mostly these tribes, they believe that they will not be demanding much, and it will be easy to carry them, and that is how the Calcutta, Birbhum area, they came up as recruiting areas, and they started emigrating, taking these recruitments for either for these plantation sites or to work somewhere else in some other part of the globe. And if you look at the Calcutta immigration reports, you will see that the ratio of Hindus and Muslims appear to represent the then all India ratio of the two communities. Among Hindus, 16% belong to higher caste, 32 to agricultural caste, and rest to the lower caste, that is the untouchables. So mostly it was the Hindus who emigrated more, and the next system was the Kangani labor immigration. Kangani, this term, it's very specific to South Indian laborers to Malaysia and Sri Lanka, and they were carried to these countries. Kangani is an anglicized modification of a Tamil word Kankan, which means overseer or a foreman. And under this scheme, you will see that the Kangani, who himself is an immigrant, he is actually the recruiter. He actually, he recruits these laborers in India and pays them in advance for the expenses that they have to meet for traveling, and even he will have his charges. He will have his deduction commission from the payments that these indentured laborers would be receiving. And in the Kangani system, there was no contract, no fixed period of service. So more or less, it was a free system in comparison to the indentured labor. But Kangani system, you will see that it began in the first quarter of the 19th century, and it was abolished in 1938. So, many Indians, how many Indians actually migrated during this period, there is hardly any report about it. And probably, there are millions have migrated, and the majority of Indian immigrants were Tamil-speaking Hindus. Today, that's the reason why today you will see in countries like Malaysia and all, you just find Tamilians who have migrated to these places since the colonial times. And Then you will see that the next form of migration was passage emigration. That was the third form of Indian migration within British Empire, and it was actually a kind of a free emigration or emigration of these trading caste and classes. And here you will see that mostly they used to travel to these African countries, the East African countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and mostly it was the Gujarati and the Punjabi communities who would go to these places. And in East Africa, mostly it was the Gujarati community who took up the jobs of shopkeepers, and in Uganda, they used to work in the railway, in the railway construction as construction workers. And in fact, yesterday we discussed that there was a policy change in Africa when there was this rising African consciousness, and Uganda and Kenya, they had certain policy changes, and this led to a second form of migration in the 70s from Africa to Great Britain. They were the generation who actually took up two different forms of migrations. They were also called the twice migrants. And at the same time, you will see that we still don't have much reliable data on Indian migration to East Africa. And there you will see that mostly today also in these African countries, you will mostly find Indians in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. And here we also have a reference of these twice migrants who moved out to Britain or to Canada and Australia, because that was the time when Africa was restructuring its policies. And the last phase was brain drain. Brain drain was a recent phenomenon that started during the late 60s and 70s, and mostly these Indians, they were migrating to these industrially advanced societies in Europe and North America. And unlike the previous generation, these were skilled professional workers. You cannot say they were manual workers, but they were professionals. They were, educated people who were into this trend of migrating. And we will be actually talking about brain drain in next few slides also. So I'm not giving much focus to this right now. And then you will see that we will actually try to have a historical view as to why the Indian diaspora, what led to their migration, and we already discussed the reasons as to why they migrated, the forms of Indian, what were the different patterns of migration, in what ways they migrated. But we'll just try to have a kind of a historical analysis, a little more historical analysis on the theme. And here we will see that when the British arrived in India as traders, we will see that politically India was fragmented, and there were not much achievement in the field of science and technology. And it was during this period that there was immense competition among the European nations, because industrial revolution was going on in England and it had already set in. And in search for new resources across the globe, these imperial countries like Britain, French, Dutch, there was a growing competition among themselves as to who would, conquer, who would end up in a new land and bring resources for the mainland. And that started, exporting of raw materials. Like, this is how we started exporting, raw materials like spices, indigo, cotton, to support the industries back in Europe. And as I told you, this led to the misery of Indian cottage industries and peasantry, which we have already taken a look at. And the economy of India was badly hit. Even, we had to export food grains like rice, wheat, and to England, leaving our villages completely crippled. I mean, we were witnessing famines. We were undergoing a phase where we are frequently being visited by droughts, and at the same time, the state was exporting food grains back home to Europe. So the condition was completely critical for the Indians. Then you will see that the British brought about certain structural changes, as I told you earlier, in the form of permanent settlement in Bengal. Then landlords, they extracted a fixed amount of price from the peasants, irrespective of productivity. There were eviction notice without their knowledge. There were famines in the 19th century and new legislations on forest rights over, that denied natural resources to people. So things were in a very critical condition. And as I told you, for every migration there is a push and a pull factor. This was the push factor, the Indian scenario. And what was the pull factor? You will see that even there was a push factor that was internationally created as well. That was through the abolition of slavery. You will see that there were numerous reasons for migration on the home turf. And you know, globally there was a massive demand for labor. Why? Because there was a demand for sugar production, and we needed laborers who can work in these sugar cane fields for the international to meet the needs of the international market. And you will see that the European imperial powers were trying to control territories which could produce sugar. So that was the reason they were in a process of hunting for resources. Okay, this is the land which produces sugar cane. This is the land that can give us coffee. This is the land that can give us cocoa. This is the land that can give us coffee or tea. So Malaysia is a place that can give us rubber. So they were in a race for hunting for territories that can give them these products. And sugar during this time was considered to be a part of industrial agriculture. It was tagged as industrial agriculture. For this, laborers were imported, and slowly the institution of slavery developed, and products like cocoa, sugar, tea, coffee found market for mass production. Slaves were carried from these old worlds like Africa, and the living conditions of these slaves, I told you yesterday also, they were extremely in a sorry state of affairs, and they were treated in a very inhuman condition, and the mortality rate of these slaves were extremely high. The reason being, they were not given enough you know food to eat, or the kind of treatment that was being meted out to them, it was pathetic. And at the same time, there was this upcoming consciousness for on humanitarian grounds for the slaves. Today when we talk about the state of migrant laborers who have who went out of Odisha, and in most part of the country, you will see that they are in such a distressful condition. And just think what would have happened to these slaves when we are talking about 18th century and early 19th century. The things when there was no media, when there was no transportation, no communications, things were really bad during that time. And slavery, it became a matter of embarrassment for the British government. And there was no way they could have defended slavery that, okay, it's a good thing. Because, you are taking away the basic rights that a human being needs to have. And, you are like trying to, you're kidnapping them, you're trying to own them like an animal. So it was a very, very sad an unfortunate state of affair, and it provided huge margins of profit to the planters and the nations who had a nexus with the plantation, owners. And this, especially, it was the imperial powers, the Britishers, who were actually drawing huge profit out of these plantation in sites because of slavery, which was run because of slavery. And the state had to ban this inhuman practice in 1802. Though slavery was allowed, but slave trade was banned in 1802. And slavery was completely abolished in 1834 by Britain, 1848 by the French, and 1863 by the Dutch. And even after the termination of slavery, the planters were, what you can say, given the rights to have full right on the labor of the ex-slaves in the form of apprenticeship. So due to certain political pressure, you will see that the period of apprenticeship was reduced to 7 years, and later it was completely abolished by 1838. And the British government, completely abolished slave trade. And even if slavery was abolished, there was completely, there was a complete abolition of slavery. You will see that the state of these ex-slaves did not improve much, because they were disconnected from their homelands. They would be having no other opportunities with them. So left in these new alien places, they would not have any choice but to go back to their ex-masters for survival. And it is interesting to note that in those days, the state used to pay compensation to the masters and not to the slaves. When slavery was abolished, the government thought that it means a huge loss for the slave owners, because they took all the burden of kidnapping them and bringing them here. And they started having this kind of a realization, and they never thought that the person who has been brought here forcibly, who has been denied all kinds of human rights, should be given any compensation. So that was the state of affairs then. And now you will see that there was a huge demand for cheap labor, because slavery has already been abolished. Some of the slaves, they were demanding higher wages, and now it was expensive for these employers to hire laborers from China, Europe, or America. In terms of transport, in terms of wages, they would be demanding more. So there was a hunt for cheap labor. They badly needed cheap labor during this period of time. And this is how this indenture labor scheme that we already discussed, it evolved slowly. Uh, Sorry, hello. Okay. So when you talk about this indenture labor scheme, you will see that for the first time, a private firm in India, it sent some 25,000 men to Mauritius, and they used to send human cargoes without respecting the dignity of being human beings. That, okay, not the way laborers are being packed in trains and buses today. I mean, think what would have happened to these laborers in 19th century. And many of these laborers, they were tricked or kidnapped to work as laborers, and they were bound to work for at least 5 years, and it was believed that they would return at the expense of the employer, or they can stay back there as a free man with all rights. But employers mostly did not adhere to the conditions that they would have promised them. They would, refrain from keeping their promises, and both men and women were carried under inhuman conditions. And mostly they would be carrying women who would cook for at least these 10 or 15 men. And some of these women would be facing there are stories of women facing molestations and of being abused by these European crew members. And you will see that it's interesting. You will, if you look at there is an anecdote that has been cited in your material. You can read it. You will see that there is this someone is inquiring, a plantation owner from West Indies, from the Caribbean islands. He has written to a recruiter of a private firm recruiter for laborers, and he is trying to say that what would be the cost of uh, laborers if he transports them to West Indies, because previously the person has transported them to Mauritius. So since West Indies is in a the place, if you look at the distance between Mauritius and West Indies, it is still far, how much the laborers would be charging. And to this, the private firm reports saying that these are completely, they are like monkeys, they are completely uneducated, they don't have any sense of geography. What they need is just food, and for food they can go to any extent. So you need not worry about distance, all you need to give them is food. So whether it is Mauritius or it is some other place, it really doesn't make any difference to them, because they are like animals. That's what, there is a, this piece has been retrieved. There is a historical document on this, and here you will see that mostly they recruited tribal laborers from Chota Nagpur Plateau, and it was during the 1840s and the 1850s, and uh, then you will see that they believe that the tribes, now that you have introduced this forest right acts, and the tribes would be in a very miserable condition. They would be not having enough to eat. So you have created the scope where you can they can migrate to these places. And if you look at the tribal population, they always had a very rich culture, and for them freedom meant everything, because they lived amidst nature. They would need music, they would need their dance. They were not used to the drudgery of being beautiful and doing this kind of slavish works. And these colonial lists, they actually estimated them very poorly, and soon it was seen that there was resentment among the tribes. And since there was a huge pressure for inducting as much as laborers as they can, they thought that it's wise to dispatch the troublemakers among the tribes. The person who is creating trouble in the village for the colonial masters, it's very it's a very wise idea if you can trick that person and send him abroad, so that the pace, the things would be smoother here in homeland, and the person would learn a good lesson, and you are completely, you have get rid of that person. So you will see that by 1850s the proportion for recruiting tribes fell. It drastically fell. It was because of the mortality rate, because while transporting them, uh, most of them they died, and it was you know there was loss of human life, but nobody was concerned about that. What they have recorded is that it created a huge massive loss, monetary loss for the plantation owners. And as I told you, tribals, they loved freedom, they loved music, they were not used to this drudgery of war. So at some point of time, the colonial state thought that it's not wise to actually induct the tribes, and demand for labor started coming from plantation sites in eastern India, where tea plantation had already started. And now what they are trying to do, they were trying to look peasants who already had the experience of agriculture, because tribals, they were not used to the kind of agricultural forms that you normally have in the valleys or in the coastal regions. They have a different set of experience when it comes to practicing cultivation. So now they started recruiting these peasants from the Indo-Gangetic plains who had a rich experience in agriculture, and it was these peasants who actually could transform the host society for the coming years, because they were the ones who were extremely rich, who had the rich experience of cultivation. They went there, they could skillfully do the job, they could bring such a good harvest for the plantation owners, and the economies for the coming centuries got completely transformed for these nations. It was because of these peasants, and it became a huge success in West Indies. Yeah. Hello, someone has put on the microphone. You have a question? You have a doubt? If not, please put your microphones on silent mode. Okay. So here you will see that it had become a huge success in West Indies because they were transforming the lands like anything. And by 1838, the government provided administrative support to this system, that is this indentured labor. And with the support of the government, with these peasants with their rich experience, they were doing miracles in these host societies. But there was a lot of abuse and corruption that was going on within the system. Uh, as I told you earlier, that it was an age where there was a massive demand for labor. We were in a phase where we really wanted to, what I would say, have more and more labor power so that we can earn more profit. So it was mostly the economic, the political economic perspective that was working here. We were not talking, we were not, sensitive to the needs of human beings, to the issues, to the idea of ethics that we are involved with, or the idea of justice. What we were bothered about was the economic practices and the huge profit that these plantation sites are trying to bring for the imperial state. And here you will see that this system came to be debated both in Great Britain and India because of certain malpractices that took place here. Some of the laborers were kidnapped because, even if the state of affairs was so poor in India, they would be not having enough to eat, or, with the failure of industries and failure of that distress that the peasantry underwent. Still, many people would not have the courage to move out of to a strange land, and they don't even, because they can see, few years ago, some people from this village went and they never returned, and there is no whereabout about these people, whether they're alive or dead. So that would create also at the same time, a rumor among these people as to whether they should go or not, because the state of communication and transportation was pathetic there. You don't have any exchange of letters, or you really don't know what happened to those men and women who had traveled there. So that led to kidnapping of these laborers to Mauritius and their ill treatment in West Indies. And these some of these reported cases were widely debated in Britain and India. And an inquiry committee was set up, and it was seen that, I'm just citing one instance, there are so many instances of deaths or of these laborers. And it was seen that the mortality rate of these laborers was quite high during transportation. Here is an example that is also given in your material, that in 1858 there was this ship called Salset, and it had a crew of 324, out of which 120 passengers died, and their bodies were thrown abroad aboard. They'll just throw the body out of this ship. So that was the case of these laborers. And during this period, that is from 1838 to 39, the immigration of Indian laborers were suspended due to an inquiry, due to this inquiry. So it was almost for a year that is there was no new recruitment going on for this laboring community. And the committee reported how laborers were abused and beaten up under inhuman conditions, and took the matter to the magistrate. But strangely, the magistrate advised them that they shouldn't pursue the matter further, and these laborers are not worthy of any sympathy. So access, they are dying here, so it doesn't make much difference. So that is how this inquiry was abruptly ended, and no outcome was there. So what happened is, licensed recruiter, normally they used to take help of, it is said, Artias. They are like, they are like the middlemen. They are like the dalals who would, pick up, who would recruit these people and hand over to the licensed recruiter, because the licensed recruiter would be sitting somewhere else. So the dalal would be, roaming around in the field. He would be there, but this person would not dare to look for a prey in the villages, because the village members would beat him up if they come to know that okay, this person is trying to trick someone or trying to kidnap someone. So he would look for his prey. He would set his trap in neutral sites like melas, the fairs, the pilgrim centers, or some towns, nearby towns, or some temple, where they can trick the laborers easily, set the trap and take them away or kidnap them if needed. So majority of the laborers were simple village folks who had no idea of their destination. They just knew that okay, life would be better if I move out, because he would be promising many things, he would be telling him many lies, and that is how they would be lured into this trade of being a labor class. Okay, I would just like to ask you, is there any clarification needed? Just let me know. You want me to continue further, or I need to stop and clarify some of your doubts? Yes, any one of you, please speak out. No?
Hello, ma'am. Could you please explain it in Odia in both languages?
Okay, which part? Which part, or the entire lecture you want to be repeated in Odia? Which part you actually missed out? କୋଉ ଜିନିଷଟା ବୁଝି ପାରିଲେନି କୁହନ୍ତୁ। ନା ଏବେ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ କହିବି ବୋଲି କହୁଛନ୍ତି। What exactly
Yes.
ଆପଣ
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. The next part, it would be
Okay.
better for us.
Okay, very good. No problem. I will try to be bilingual. ମୁଁ ଓଡ଼ିଆ ଇଂଲିଶ ଦିଟାରେ କହିବି। That's what I wanted you to say. ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯୋଉଠି ଅସୁବିଧା ହଉଛି you stop me. ମୁଁ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷଟା ବୁଝି ପାରୁନି, ମତେ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ ବୁଝେଇ ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ କି ମତେ ଏଇଟା ଇଂଲିଶରେ ଏବେ କୁହନ୍ତୁ। Okay, just let me know wherever you have
Okay.
doubt. Okay.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
ଦେଖ ଆମେ ଏଠି ଗୋଟେ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ବିଷୟରେ କହୁଛେ, ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଡେଞ୍ଜର୍ଡ ଲେବର ସିଷ୍ଟମ ଯୋଉଟା କି କହୁଛନ୍ତି, ତାକୁ ତାର ଓଡ଼ିଆ ଟ୍ରାନ୍ସଲେସନ ମୁଁ କରିପାରିବିନି, କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇ ସିଷ୍ଟମଟା କେତେବେଳେ ଆସିଲା? ଏଟା ଆସିଲା around 1834 ଯେତେବେଳେ ସ୍ଲେଭରୀଟା ଆବଲିଶ ହେଇଗଲା। ସ୍ଲେଭରୀଟା ତାଠାରୁ ବି ଗୋଟେ ଆହୁରି ଖରାପ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ ଥିଲା, ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି ଆଫ୍ରିକାନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଜବରଦସ୍ତିଆ ତାଙ୍କ ଘରୁ କୋଉଠି ବି ଟେକି ଆଣିକି ଜବରଦସ୍ତିଆ ମାନେ ଟେକିକି ନେଇ ଯାଉଥିଲେ, so that they can work as slaves, ତାଙ୍କୁ ସ୍ଲେଭ ବନେଇବା ପାଇଁ to distant countries like America, Canada, Britain, ଯୋଉଠି ବି ତାଙ୍କ ୟୁଜ ହେଇପାରିବ ତାଙ୍କୁ ସବୁଆଡେ ନେଇକି ପଳଉଥିଲେ। and ସ୍ଲେଭରୀଟା abolished ଏଇଥିପାଇଁ ହେଲା because it was an inhuman practice, ଗୋଟେ ବହୁତ ଖରାପ ପ୍ରଥା ଏଇଟା ଥିଲା। ଆଉ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ କେବେ ହେଲେ ଏଟାକୁ ସପୋର୍ଟ କରିପାରି ନଥାନ୍ତା, କେବେ ହେଲେ ଜଷ୍ଟିଫାଇ କରିପାରନ୍ତା ନା 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 ଏଟା ଚଳିବ। ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଜାଣିଛି ଏଟା ଉଠିଗଲେ ବହୁତ ଅସୁବିଧା ହବ, ତେଣୁ ସେ ଚୁପଚାପ ରହିଥିଲା। କିନ୍ତୁ ଏବେ ଗୋଟେ ଏମିତି ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଆସିଗଲା ଯେ it was being criticized, ସମସ୍ତେ ତାକୁ କ୍ରିଟିସାଇଜ କରୁଥିଲେ, ତେଣୁ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ତାକୁ ଆଉ ଜଷ୍ଟିଫାଇ କରିପାରିଲାନି, ତେଣୁ ବାଧ୍ୟ ହେଇକି ସ୍ଲେଭରୀଟା ଉଠେଇଲା। କିନ୍ତୁ ଉଠେଇଲା ପରେ ବି ସେ ସେମିତି କିଛି ଆରେଞ୍ଜମେଣ୍ଟ ସେ ଯୋଉ ସ୍ଲେଭ୍ସ ମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ କରିନଥିଲା ଯେ ସେମାନେ ଫେରିଯିବେ, ତାଙ୍କ ଷ୍ଟେଟଟା ଏମିତି କିଛି ବଦଳି ନଥିଲା। ଆଉ ଏବେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସ୍ଲେଭରୀଟା ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଆବଲିଶ କରିଦେଇଛି, ଗୋଟେ ଇଲିଗାଲ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ ହେଇଯାଇଛି, ସେମାନେ ଆଉ କଣ୍ଟିନ୍ୟୁ କରିପାରିବେନି ନା ନୂଆ କୋଉଠି ଯାଇକି କାହାକୁ ସ୍ଲେଭ ଆଣି ତିଆରି କରିବା କି ସ୍ଲେଭ କାହାକୁ ବିକ୍ରି କରିକି କିଣିକି ଆଣିବା। କିଣା ବିକା ଆଉ ସ୍ଲେଭ ମାନଙ୍କର ଚାଲିପାରିବନି, ଏଟା କିଣା ବିକା ହଉଥିଲା। ମାନେ ଯେମିତି ଆମେ ହାଟରେ ପଶୁ ପକ୍ଷୀ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ କିଣା ବିକା କରୁଛୁ, ମଣିଷ ସେମିତି ବିକ୍ରି ହଉଥିଲେ। that was the case। ମୁଁ ଯେତେ କହୁଛି ମାନେ ମିଡ୍ 19th century late 18th century କଥା। ତେଣୁ ତାପରେ ଯୋଉ ନୂଆ ସିଷ୍ଟମଟା ଆସିଲା ସେଟାକୁ ଆମେ ଇଣ୍ଡେଞ୍ଜର୍ଡ ଲେବର କହିଲେ। କଣ ନା ଏଇ ସ୍କିମଟାରେ ତମେ ଯିବ ଗୋଟେ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାକୁ, ତମେ ମିନିମମ୍ 3 ବର୍ଷଠୁ 7 ବର୍ଷ ଯେତିକି ବି ତମର ଚାହିଁବ, ଗୋଟେ ମଣିଷ ପାଇଁ ତମେ କାମ କରିପାରିବ କିମ୍ବା ଗୋଟେ କମ୍ପାନୀ ପାଇଁ ତମେ କାମ କରିପାରିବ। ଆଉ ମୋଷ୍ଟଲି ସେମାନେ ଯାଉଥିଲେ ଯୋଉଠି ଯୋଉଠି ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟେସନ ହଉଥିଲା। କି ପ୍ରକାର ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟେସନ? ନା ଆଖୁ, କାହିଁକିନା ଆଖୁରୁ ସୁଗର କେନ୍ ହଉଥିଲା। ମାନେ ନୂଆ ନୂଆ ଚିନିଟା ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରଡକ୍ଟ ହିସାବରେ ଆଭେଲେବୁଲ ହଉଥିଲା। ଆମେ ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ କେବେ ଚିନି ଦେଖିନଥିଲେ ଆଜ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ସ। ତମେ ଦେଖିଥିବ ବହୁତ ନୂଆ ଜିନିଷ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର୍ସ ମାନେ ଆଣିଲେ ଆମ ଦେଶକୁ। ଚା, ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ସ ମାନେ କେବେ ଚା ଚାଖି ନଥିଲେ ଜୀବନରେ। କି ଯୋଉଟା ଆଳୁ, ଟମାଟୋକୁ ଆମେ କଣ କହୁ ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ? ବିଲାତି କହୁ। କାହିଁକି ବିଲାତି ବାଇଗଣ? ବିକଜ ବିଲାତିରୁ ଆସିଛି। ସୋ ତମେ ଏବେ ବି ଦେଖିବ ଜଗନ୍ନାଥ ମନ୍ଦିରରେ ଆଳୁ କି ଟମାଟୋ ପଶେନି, ବିକଜ that was not an indigenous product, ସେଟା ବ୍ରିଟିଶର୍ସ ଆଣିଥିଲେ। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ସବୁ products ର ତମେ କଣ କହିବ ଏଇ ସବୁ products ର demand ବହୁତ ଅଧିକ ଥିଲା international market ରେ ଚିନି ପାଇଁ ଲୋକ ପାଗଳ ହେଇଥିଲେ ଗୋଟେ ନୂଆ ଗୋଟେ ଏତେ ଟେଷ୍ଟି ଜିନିଷଟେ ତେଣୁ ଚିନି ଚା କଫି କୋକା ପାଉଡର ଯୋଉଥିରୁ ଚକୋଲେଟ ତିଆରି ହଉଛି ୟାର ଡିମାଣ୍ଡ ବହୁତ ଅଧିକା ଥିଲା ରବର ସବୁ ଇଣ୍ଡଷ୍ଟ୍ରିଜ ରେ ରବର ଗୁଡାକ ୟୁଜ ହବ ରବର ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟେସନ ତେଣୁ ୟା ପାଇଁ ଲୋକ କୋଉଠୁ ଏବେ ଆସିବ ସ୍ଲେଭରୀ ତ ଆବଲିଶ କରିଦେଲେ ତାକୁ ଉଠେଇଦେଲେ ପୁରା କାରଣ ଏଟା ଗୋଟେ ଖରାପ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ ଥିଲା ସମସ୍ତେ କହିଲେଣି ଆମେ କଣ୍ଟିନ୍ୟୁ କରିପାରିବାନି ଇଏ କରିପାରିବାନି ତେଣୁ ଆମକୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଇଣ୍ଡେଞ୍ଜର୍ଡ ଲେବର ସିଷ୍ଟମଟା ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବାକୁ ପଡିଲା ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି ଆମେ ରିକ୍ରୁଟ କଲୁ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ପ୍ରଥମେ ସେମାନେ ଛୋଟା ନାଗପୁର ପ୍ଲାଟ୍ୟୁରୁ ଆଦିବାସୀ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ରିକ୍ରୁଟ କଲେ କିନ୍ତୁ ଆଦିବାସୀ ମାନେ ଏମିତି ତାଙ୍କର ନା ଏଗ୍ରିକଲଚର ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ ଏତେ ଥାଏ ଏତେ ଏକ୍ସପିରିଏନ୍ସ ଥାଏ ଆଉ ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ଏମିତି ସ୍ଲେଭ ହେଇକି ରହିପାରିବେନି ଆଜି ଇଚ୍ଛା ହେଲା ନାଇଁ ମୁଁ ସେଟା କରିବିନି ଗୋଟେ ନେଚର ଭିତରେ ସେମାନେ ବଢିକି ଆସିଛନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କୁ ବନ୍ଦ ବାନ୍ଦ କରିକି ବାନ୍ଧିକି ରଖିଲେ ସେମାନେ ରହିବେନି ଆଉ ବହୁତ ଆଦିବାସୀ ମରିଗଲେ ବାଟରେ ଯାଉ ଯାଉକା ସେଇଟାକୁ ସେମାନେ ବନ୍ଦ କରିକି ସେମାନେ ଦେଖିଲେ କି ଯେ କିଏ ଏବେ ଚାଷ କରିପାରିବ ନା ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ନର୍ଥ ଗ୍ୟାଞ୍ଜେଟିକ ପ୍ଲେନ୍ ଯୋଉଠି ନର୍ଥ ପାର୍ଟ ଅଫ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆଟା ଯୋଉଠି ବହୁତ ଫର୍ଟାଇଲ ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଚାଷ ହୁଏ ସେଇଠୁ ଏବେ ପିଜେଣ୍ଟସ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ରିକ୍ରୁଟ କଲେ ସମସ୍ତେ ତ ଯିବାକୁ ରାଜି ହେବେନି କାରଣ ଡର ଲାଗିବ ନା ଗାଁକୁ ଛାଡିକି ମୁଁ କୁଆଡେ ଯିବି ମୁଁ ଯିବି କି କୋଉଠି କଣ ହବ ମୁଁ ଡରିବି ତେଣୁ ଏକ ତ ଘରେ ବହୁତ ଅସୁବିଧା ଆମର ଏତେ କିଛି ଇଏ ହଉନି ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଏତେ ଟ୍ୟାକ୍ସ ଲାଗୁ କରିଦେଇଛି ଦେଇପାରୁନୁ ସେଥିରେ ଏତେ ଦୁର୍ଭିକ୍ଷ ହଉଛି ଇଏ ହଉଛି ଖାଇବାକୁ ଠିକ ସେ ମିଳୁନି ତେଣୁ ସେଇଟାରୁ ଗୋଟେ ମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ପୁsh ଫ୍ୟାକ୍ଟର ବି ରହିଛି ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରଲୋଭନ ବି ଦେଖେଇ ପାରୁଛି ଆଉ ତା ବାଦେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ମୁଁ କହିଲି କି ଯେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଆରଟିଆସ ଯୋଉଟା ଆମେ କହିଲୁ ସେ ମାନେ କଣ କରିବେ ଗୋଟେ ଦଲାଲ ଭଳିଆ ସେମାନେ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଗାଁରୁ ଖୋଜିବେ ଗାଁ ଭିତରକୁ ପଶିବେନି କାହିଁକିନା ଗାଁ ଲୋକ ବାଡେଇବେ ତେଣୁ ଗାଁ ବାହାରୁ କୋଉଠି ମେଳାରୁ କୋଉଠି ମନ୍ଦିର ପାଖରୁ କୋଉଠି କିଏ ଯାଇଛି କୋଉ ତୀର୍ଥ ସ୍ଥଳକୁ ସେଇଠି ଲୋକଙ୍କୁ ସବୁ ଭଲ ଭଲ କଥା କହିକି ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରିବେ ଫସେଇକି ତାଙ୍କୁ ଯେମିତି ଲେବରେଟ କରିବେ ଦରକାର ପଡିଲେ କିଡନାପିଂ କରିଦେବେ ଉଠେଇବି ଦେବେ ସୋ ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍ ୱାଜ ଦ କେସ୍ ଏଠି ଗୋଟେ ଏମିତି ଆବ୍ୟୁଜ ହବା ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଇସାରିଥିଲା ଏଇ ସିଷ୍ଟମଟା ଆଉ ୟା ବିଷୟରେ ରିପୋର୍ଟ ହେଇଥିଲା ୟା ବିଷୟରେ ରିପୋର୍ଟ ହେଲା ଗୋଟେ ଏନକ୍ୱାରି କମିଟି ବି ବସିଲା କିନ୍ତୁ ମାଜିଷ୍ଟ୍ରେଟ କହିଲା ନା 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 କିଛି ହେଇପାରିବନି କାରଣ ସମସ୍ତେ ଜାଣିଛନ୍ତି ସ୍ଲେଭରୀ ଆବଲିଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଯାଇଛି ଆମେ ଉଠେଇ ଦେଇଛେ ଏଇଟା ଯଦି ଉଠିଯିବ ତାହେଲେ ପୁରାପୁରି ମାନେ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ସରକାରଙ୍କର ଯୋଉଟା ମେରୁଦଣ୍ଡ ଭାଙ୍ଗିଯିବ it will give a severe blow to the British government ତେଣୁ that is the reason the magistrate was trying to suppress the case ସମସ୍ତେ ଏଟା ସବୁ ଜାଣିକି ବି ସପ୍ରେସ କରିବାକୁ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କଲେ ଆମ ପାଖେ ଆଉ କିଛି ଚାରା ନଥିଲା ଯୋଉ ବି ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ସ ମାନେ ଗଲେ ସେଠି ରହିଲେ they started living in a community and ନର୍ମାଲି ତମେ ଦେଖିବ ଆମମାନଙ୍କର ଆମ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ୍ସକୁ ନେଇକି ଆମ କଲଚରକୁ ନେଇକି ଆମେ ବହୁତ ରିଜିଡ ନର୍ମାଲି ତମେ ଦେଖିବ ଘର ମାନଙ୍କରେ ବି ଆଜି ଏଇ ପୂଜା ଅଛି ଆଜି ସେଇ ପୂଜା ଅଛି ମା ତମକୁ କହୁଥିବେ ନ ଗାଧେଇଲେ ଖାଇବୁନି ଏୟା କରିବୁନି ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଯାହା ଛୁଆବେଳୁ ଶିଖି ଆସିଛୁ ଯୋଉ ସବୁ ଆମର କାଷ୍ଟକୁ ନେଇକି ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସେସ୍ ଆମର ଧର୍ମକୁ ନେଇକି ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସେସ୍ ସହଜରେ ଛାଡି ପାରିବୁନି କିନ୍ତୁ ଦେଖ ସେଇଟା ଅବସ୍ଥା ଏମିତି ଥିଲା ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ଜାହାଜରେ ପୁରା ଜକାଜକି ହେଇକି ବସିଥିବେ ସେଇଠି ବ୍ରାହ୍ମଣ ବି ଥିବେ ସେଇଠି ଶୂଦ୍ର ବି ଥିବେ ସେଇଠି ମୁଁ ଆଉ କହିପାରିବିନି କି ଯେ ନା ନା ସେ ଶୂଦ୍ର ସେ ବ୍ରାହ୍ମଣ ମୁଁ ସେଇଠି ଖାଇବିନି ତା ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଖାଇବିନି ମୋ ପାଖେ ଆଉ କିଛି ଚାରା ନାହିଁ ସେଠୁ ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ I tend to get rid of these practices ଗୋଟେ ବଣ୍ଡିଂ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଯାଉଛନ୍ତି ସେଇଠିକି ତାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ବଣ୍ଡିଂ ଡେଭଲପ କରିବ ଯୋଉଟା କି ପପୁଲାରଲି ସେଇ ଟାଇମରେ କୁହାଗଲା ଜାହାଜୀ ଭାଇ the persons who were taking up these sea voyages they had to get rid of certain age-old practices, certain normative practices, and they started sharing a relationship with the co-travelers. କାହିଁକିନା ଦି ଜଣଙ୍କର ଅବସ୍ଥା ଏକା ସେଇଠି ଜାତି ଧର୍ମ ଆଉ କଥା ପଡିନି କିଏ ଗୋଟେ ଆମ ଭିତରୁ ମରିଗଲା ସେ ଜାହାଜରେ ତାକୁ ଉଠେଇକି ନେଇକି ସେମାନେ ଫୋପାଡ଼ି ଦେବେ ସିଧା ଜାହାଜ ବାହାରେ ସମୁଦ୍ରରେ ତେଣୁ ସେଇଠି ମୁଁ ଆଉ ଯାହା ଆମର 13 ଦିନ ଏତିକି ମାନୁ ସେୟା ମାନୁ କିଛି କରିପାରିବିନି I'll not be in a position to help these people out. We started calling them ଜାହାଜୀ ଭାଇ because ସେଇଠି ଗୋଟେ ବଣ୍ଡିଂ ହେଲା ସେ ଜାହାଜରେ ତେଣୁ ସେଇଠି we were known as Indians as immigrant Indians ଆଉ କିଛି ଆଇଡେଣ୍ଟିଟି ଆମର ନାହିଁ ତେଣୁ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ଭିତରେ ଥିଲା ବେଳକୁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ ଏଇ ଗାଁର ମୁଁ ସେଇ ଜାତିର ମୁଁ ସେଇ ଧର୍ମର ଯୋଉ numerous identities that we are trying to weave around ourselves that was slowly getting abolished what my point so here you will see that the plantation owners were eager to retain these laborers as they had transformed their lands. ये जो plantation owners थिले से माने देखिले जति ए लेबरर मानकर टर्म भी सरी जाउची जति 5-7 वर्ष पर्यंत तार टर्म थिबो ना ताठू अधिक नथिबो सरी गला पर से पळेले कोन करिवि सहजरे लोक मिलवा भारी कष्ट तेनु माने आ यांको हाथ रे मिराकल अछि ए माने एमिति करले जे माने पूरा पूरा से देशटा को बदली देले एते प्रॉफिट ताकू ब्रिटिश सरकार को समस्त so they have transformed the nations completely not the land completely. So what happened, you will see that what a case study I am taking the case of Trinidad. In 1851 Trinidad offered 10 pounds to forfeit their return 5-7 वर्ष पर से माने फेरिबे तमे जदी न फेरिबो मु तुमको 10 पाउंड देबी. Okay, so that was the offer that the Trinidad government started giving. Then in 1861 they granted 10 acres of land if they decided to stay back and continue their war. तापरे आउ 10 वर्ष परे से माने ते प्रपोज कि अच्छा तमे जाओनी और तो सेठी तो खाली जमी ही जमी because those were places जो थरे कि inhabited नथिला ए माने जाई कि प्लांटेशन आरंभ करले ए माने जाई कि नुवा नुवा सब ये देखैले तांको बाटा बतेइले तो ए माने पळेला कोन हबो. So that was the reason they said कि तुम माने जाओनी तुमको 10 एकड़ जमी हमें दो. And just imagine a landless laborer who never had a land of his own, a single slightest small piece of land of his own back home. अबे इटा ଗୋଟେ ବହୁତ ବଡ଼ allure में 10 एकड़ जमी मिलिबो घर को जाई कि कोन करिवे. And at the same time it was then revised तापर आ कुछ दिन पर ताको पुणी रिवाइज करले ना 5 एकड़ जमी दबो आ 5 pounds. 5 pounds was a big amount of money then. And if they stayed with wife जदी सेठी बाहा है कि तमे छुआ पिला जन्म करी कि तमे जदी सेठी पूरा रही गलो if you are settled there ताहले आउ 5 pound अधिका for your family. You know that is how you will see that a new diasporic community emerging. तमे West Indies can anyone talk? Can listen to me? तमे देखिथिबो West Indies cricket team रे you will find many Indians. इतने Indians चारिआडे because they were nobody but these immigrant laborer जो माने ए टाइम रे सेठी जाइथिले माइग्रेट हेकी. Got my point? बुझी होची? Okay. So Indians knew that the value, they already knew the value of land, and back home land system had become so distorted after colonialism. इतनी खंडे जमी पाइबा कि चाष आरंभ करिबा जमी थिले भी it was very complicated situation in India because of the new kind of land policies that was being introduced by this colonial government. ये जो land policy introduce हेथिला इंडिया रे आउ किछि करि हबनी मो इच्छा जहा मु सेटा चाष करि परिबेनी कले भी ताकू एते टैक्स देबी ताकू बेटर एठी हम फ्री मैन एठी एते के पर जमी मिलबो and some of them were lured to stay back. से प्रलोभन रे से देखै कि ताकू रखि दिया जायतिला. And thus they continued to stay back and transform their economies and their own identities as well. धीरे धीरे तांकर आउ they were no more Indians. They were you can say West Indies with you can say Trinidadians with people from Indian origin. They were Indo-Malaysians. So slowly their newer identities were emerging with this kind of a change in their lives. Okay. Now coming to the next phase, that is migration in post-independence era. Till now we were discussing migration in the colonial period. Colonial times रे को प्रकार migration हेतिबा आमे ताहाई ए पर्यंत डिस्कस करथिले. You will see that 20th century saw immigration of Indians to industrially advanced countries. कि 20th century रे आउ से माने plantation sites को गलेनी चाष करिया पे एटा ଗୋଟେ प्रोफाइल चेंज हे सारथिला ए जो नुवा इमिग्रेंट्स मानकर. And it was especially after the Second World War. After 1947, you can see three broad patterns of migration that was seen among the Indians. Indians मानक भितरे तीन प्रकार migration देखिया को मिला. Immigration to Anglo-Indians, to England and to Australia. emigration, sorry, of Anglo-Indians. Anglo-Indians को माने, Anglo-Indians were the children who were born out of British and Indian parents. जो मानक parents both British और Indians थिले, से माने Anglo-Indians. So Anglo-Indians को प्रति basic किसी studies है नहीं, and at the same time you will see that they have been neglected. They were like the illegitimate children of children for both the Indians and English people. Na etika rahi parthile na setika rahi parthile. So after independence, some of the Anglo-Indians they moved to England, and some of them they believed कि ना England रे भी तांको सेतिकी status मिलिबनी, तांको सेतिकी due respect देबेनी. They moved away to these distant Newfoundland of America, Australia, Canada. So that was a new trend of emigration that was seen among the Anglo-Indians. The second trend was immigration of professionals to industrially advanced nations like America, Canada, and England. These are the people who were professionals, who were educated. माने पाठशाला पढ़ते संग पाखे skills थिला, engineers हुआ, doctor हुआ, scientist हुआ. These were the people who actually moved out of this country to join the industrially advanced nations like America, Canada, and England. And the next pattern of emigration was among both skilled and unskilled labor to the West Asia. West Asia पहले तम Saudi Arabia हैला, तम Middle East countries हैला, जोटा oil rich nations. सेठी as unskilled as laborers भी गले, as skilled workers, as professionals भी गले. तेनु after independence हमें तीनिटा trend रो migration देखिया को पाइले. There were three trends of migration that was available to us after independence. Now we will have a look at the migration pattern across the globe. Indians माने कुआडे कुआडे गले, को period रे कुआडे गले, को प्रकार रो migration से थिला. We will try to have a look at it. तमे देखो, with changing times migration रो pattern भी बदलुची. Colonial times रे it was the laboring class. Post colonial times रे it was both the educated and the semi educated Indians. And after independence, the migration to these plantation sites had completely stopped. आमे लोको सेठी आउ वेस्ट इंडीज जाउ नथले कि मलेशिया जाउ नथले कि मॉरिशस जाउ नथले प्लांटेशन साइट्स रे काम करिया. They were going to the industrialized west or to the Middle East countries and industrial regions, industrially developed nations. तेनु देखो गोटे contrast आस्ता. There was a contrast. Pre-independence time, the pull force was agriculture. The skill they needed was agriculture. Post-independence era, the skill they needed was to work in industries. So, एठी गोटे नुआ kind of trend आरंभ होउची. Then we'll try to look at some of the trends of migration after independence. You will see that during 1960s and 70s, one could witness a chain of migration, and it was popularly called the twice migrants. Those who migrated to Britain from Africa due to radical policies taken up in Kenya and Uganda. काली भी last time भी कही last class रे जे Kenya and Uganda रे गोटे African consciousness rise करथिला. And they were having certain policies जो थे कि Indian immigrants मानक पे beneficial ही न था. Indian immigrants जो माने कि जाई कि सेठी थिले during the colonial period, से मानक पे एबे 50s, 60s, 70s पड़े things were getting difficult, and they were ready to take up another route of migration. तो से माने India को फेरी आसिलेनी. India को फेरी न आसी के से माने किछटा ब्रिटिश को फेरी गले because से माने ब्रिटिश citizenship थिले, because Kenya, Uganda they were under British rule. तेनु जितने बड़े they were withdrawing and these new countries were having their own policies, they migrated to British or to Canada, जोटा कि still Commonwealth Union under रे आसुथिला. Then migration to the USA started after 1820, but the large scale was seen during 1965 with the repeal of Immigration and Nationality Act. ତମେ ଦେଖିବ 1965 ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ till 1965, they had a Nationality and Immigration Act that denied entry of Indians. ସେମାନେ ଏତେଟା encourage କରୁନଥିଲେ Indians ମାନଙ୍କୁ migrate କରିବା ପାଇଁ. ସେ ଯୋଉ act ଟା repealed ହେଇଗଲା in 1965, and after that there was a stream of migration to the United States of America. And mostly you will see it was professional Indians who migrated to USA for a better life. Mostly doctors, engineers, scientists, or what we call the knowledge act, the knowledge industry that was, trying to seek these kind of services. And after 1990s also, the US economy faced a surge in information technology. Today, IT coach. You have so many software engineers. जो घरे भी जो भी तमे टेकाटे पकेले, you will find a software engineer who is relocated, who was migrated out of India, out of Odisha, and has settled there. So there was a demand for skilled professionals to work in these US corporations. In this new emerging IT world, there was a huge demand for Indian professionals. And at the same time, you will see that Canada, it has the largest population of Indians among other South Asian migrants. And majority have migrated after 1947, when racial immigration barrier was slapped, because Canada was having a kind of a barrier towards certain group of immigrants, and it was racially biased against them. So when these things were slacked, they started migrating. Canada को migrate वाले, and till today Sikh, they remain the majority in Canada as far as Indians are concerned. Sikh manako population Canada रे सब Indians को ठारे सबको अधिक. That is the favorite destination for Sikhs. Then Australia and New Zealand, they are new emerging destinations for Indians today, because these are, ତାଙ୍କର immigration policies भी difficult नुहे, and they find it, people find it much easier than Canada and India, and today they are the favorite destinations for people, Indians who want to emigrate. And then you will see that following the oil boom in West Asia after 1970s, with the massive surge of South Asian workers, mostly Middle East, who you will see Kerala is very famous. Keralites, they go to the Middle East a lot as skilled and semi-skilled, both skilled and semi-skilled laborers. And this was based on fixed temporary contract. एतिक दिन पे काम करिवो, एतिक पैसा न, and the money they pay is quite alluring. So that is one of the favorite destinations after oil. 1970s ପରେ ଯେମିତି these oil rich nations, they were undergoing this process of oil boom, that became the favorite destination of South Indian workers. And the destinations were mostly the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Libya. These were the favorite destinations for these Indians who were trying to migrate. Now, how does the Indian state look at the migrants? What is the policy of the Indian state towards the immigrants? We will be discussing more in detail in the next coming sessions. Maybe Nehruvian time रे कौन थिला, धीरे धीरे केमिति आमे हम policies को आहुरी ये करी foster करी करू. But after independence, India was not very serious about its diaspora community, because it had a lot of problems that needed to be handled at home. diaspora community जोटा कि एते टाइम हला मे बी फ्रॉम एंशिएंट टाइम्स ये medieval times re and के colonial time re they have migrated to these places, so it didn't give a lot of thought to these communities. Initially, it was pushing the settlers to identify with the host countries. जो जति भी केबे किए किछि चाहुथिले किछि माने any kind of help, Indian government रो सब बळे तार position थिला जे you identify yourself with your host country. जो देश रे तमे जाई कि बसी चढ़बे तमे जाई कि सेटल करि सारछ तमे सेई देश सहित निजर आइडेंटिटी एबे बने तमे अब भूली जाओ जे तमे इंडियंस थिलो. पर धीरे धीरे they started acknowledging कि ना केते हेले भी से माने इंडियंस we have certain responsibilities for them. से माने पढे छंती माने कोन हमर कुछ responsibilities नाही. तेनो धीरे माने after independence you will see that there was a radical shift. The government started acknowledging that, and even Indian constitution part 11 article 8 it allows the persons whose grandparents were Indians and they can register for Indian citizenship. But one thing was for sure that India never allowed dual citizenship. Etikar citizen tame hei paribani. India never allowed that. And here it is important for me to point out two concepts: PIOs, people of Indian origin, and NRIs, non-resident Indians. People of Indian origins, they were the ones whose parents or either grandparents, any one of the grandparents were Indians. जो माने कि बहुत आगुरु जाई कि सेठी पोसिसन माने सेठी सेटल करि सारछंती. They were the persons of Indian origin. जदि कोनोसी तमरो ग्रैंडपेरेंट्स इंडियन थिले ताहले you will be considered to be a POI. NRIs were the more recent settlers जो माने कि because of their profession, because of education से माने जाई कि सेठी सेटल करछंती. So Indian state they tried to reach out to the NRIs, but they never made any effort to reach out to the PIOs. से माने इतने वर्ष होला जाई कि सेठी सेटल करछंती, and they belong to the the old diaspora. They belong to the category of the old diaspora. Indian state was more concerned about the new diaspora, जो माने कि वे recently settled करछंती. And that's the reason you will see that they never made any effort to reach out to these PIOs or the old diaspora till 1999. During 1999, the Ministry of Home Affairs came up with a card that was called People of Indian Origin Card, and this scheme gave a host of facilities which was normally given to the NRIs but not to the PIOs. PIOs, they had a different status than the NRIs. NRIs were welcome, but PIOs, we were not indifferent to them, but at the same time, we were not very welcoming to them. So, this PIO card, it ushered in a new generation of, the way we look at our diaspora community, people of the Indian origin. So now we will look at certain types of migration flows. कि केते प्रकार रो माइग्रेशन की माइग्रेट एक्चुअली करे केते प्रकार लोक करंती से लोक मानक पाके को प्रकार स्किल्स अछि. We'll try to look at that. One is permanent high skilled migration. जेटा कि permanently से माने माइग्रेट करंती तांकर बहुत हाई स्किल्ड प्रोफेशनल से माने maybe they are professionals जो माने कि जोठी की जिबे they will end up in a host country, they economically viable for that host country. Normally those professionals, they can be rated as the permanent high skilled migrants. You will find these permanent high skilled migrants in countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and you will see that Australia it offers permanent residency to them. कि आसा तमे पूरा पूरी रही जाओ तमे गोटे पीआर स्टेटस से माने दे देबे परमानेंट रेसिडेंसी स्टेटस टू हाई स्किल प्रोफेशनल्स जेटा कि से माने इंडक्ट करंती रिक्रूट करंती एंड they got to believe that okay, this person has enough skills and they can actually give certain benefits to our economy. So they would be welcoming those kind of people. You send them your profile, they will go through it and they will try to give you a PR status. So Canada and Australia, they have mostly Canada, sorry, Australia. It has started coming up with this permanent residency scheme. The next temporary high skilled migration, it comes because there is a shortage of skilled professionals in the host countries, and that's the reason they need it. They know that I don't know about the future, I don't know how am I going to deal with the situation, but right now there is a crunch. Situation is such that I cannot do without these without importing these professionals. ମୋ industries ଚାଲିବନି, ମୁଁ କାମ କରିପାରିବିନି, I have to give permanent residency to some migrants. ଗୋଟେ temporary phase ପାଇଁ at least ମୁଁ କିଛି high skilled migration welcome କରିବି. There are certain countries. Then there is this temporary low skilled migration. जोटा कि normally तमे देखिबो Gulf countries को जो माने जानती. There is a need for temporary low skilled job. ए कामटा अछि, एठी construction work अछि, factory रे ए कामोडा अछि, maybe 6 मास पे किछटा रिक्रूट करो कि गोटे वर्ष पे रिक्रूट करो, से माने एति पैसा नेबे सब छिडे दियो, से अनुसार तमे ये करो. So mostly you will find Indians and Pakistans who come to fill up this position as construction workers. Mostly they are in the form of construction workers. Then the next is family migration. You are trying to move from a low or middle income country to a high income country. You first settle there, then you try to bring your family, and as a family you migrate. There are people who get married there and they want to migrate somewhere else. Tango spouse foreigner gote heithibo ki children out kote thibe, children gote sethi janma hoyi sethi citizen heithibe, they can migrate as a family to those places. Then you have visa free migration. Visa free migration it exists with between certain countries जो कि visa दरकार पड़े नहीं जो देशों माने कर travel करिए. For example, the countries that comes within European Union में जितने देश अच्छी, in order to travel from one country to another, you don't need a visa. तुम्हारा visa दरकार नहीं, तुम simply travel कर पाएंगे. Or between Australia and New Zealand. Australia to New Zealand जहाँ पे तुम्हारा visa दरकार नहीं. You can travel there with your Australian passport. With your Australian visa, you can visit New Zealand. So this provides them the right to work for unlimited period. Normally, तुम्हारा visa टा किसी period पे valid था. Suppose say तुम्हारा visa टा valid अच्छी for 2 years in America, you have to return after 2 years. Anyhow, within 2 years time, that's the limit. But for countries who have a visa-free migration, जैसे कि मैं कहली European Union रे, जने suppose Spain to Italy गला. They don't need a visa. See, Italy रे देखिला बहुत opportunity अच्छी बहुत काम करिया कुछ. Normally visa टा कोटे timeline restriction आने था. Here that restriction is not there. I can work for an unlimited period. It's as good as working in Spain. And ଆମର ସେଇଠି ମୁଁ ସେଠିକାର ମୁଁ ବାସିନ୍ଦା ଯଦି. So and it's most beneficial to students. Students माने जोठी पाठ पढ़िया को चाहिए ସେମାନେ पढ़ी परिबे, they can avail any opportunity if they want to. So that's called a visa-free migration. And mostly you will find students within this category. Then there is undocumented migration, जोटा कि हमें कहूँ illegal migration. You have in terms of refugees. Suppose India has a number of Tibetan refugees, Bangladeshi refugees. जो माने कि तांकर किसी documents नहीं, but today they claim Indian citizenship. India तारा citizenship तांको ये करी संची. Asylum seekers, they are asylum seekers. Or trafficked women, जो मानों को for sex trade, ki for any other trade, they have been trafficked. They don't have proper papers, but they have been trafficked. So these are the major chunks of illegal that goes under the tag of undocumented migration. Then you'll also find a feminization of migration. When I talk about migration, it has always been a masculine experience.
normally पुरुष लोक माने ही migrate करुथिले previously. You will see both in colonial times, ancient times तो chance ही नथिला, but colonial times रे भी it was very few. यदि 20टा men members को से recruit करछन्ती ताले गोटे women को recruit करथिबे कि जे रंधा बढा करिवो, either ता wife रे हेतिबो कि एतिबे mostly women माने जानतेनी, they have to manage on their own. But today migrate करबे जति with family. Women are the majority migrants because they have to migrate along with the family. But women are sole travelers, are sole migrants. That has never happened. Men माने जेमति जोठी भी जाई कि से माने they will try to explore their future. They are try to try some new experiences. Women were never allowed to do that. But today you will find feminization of this migration process. If more and more women are coming up, both women are on their own migrate. They are not migrating as dependents. I'm somebody's wife and my husband is migrating and that's the reason I have to migrate, or my son is migrating. No, I have migrated because I find a good opportunity there. So they are migrating on their own. And majority of these migrants are in the form of domestic help. जो माने कि आउ कोठी घर काम household work करि बारे को चाहउछंती बाहर जाई कि where they can get a good pay. Caregivers who can give the nurses or any kind of caregivers, and entertainers who belong to the field of entertainers, and they widely migrate, they widely travel for their jobs. So this is a new trend of migration that has come up in recent times.
Okay, now we will try to have a look at the adaptation processes that these Indian migrants have taken up. केमिति से मैंने adapt करछंती निजकु विभिन्न नुआ नुआ जगह रे, what new kind of identities they have taken up for themselves. If you look at the Indian migrants, different host countries, they were in non-homogeneous categories. Come the Indians, if you go to any country abroad, तमे बाहर को जाउछो, आउ तमको जने पचारुची, are you an Indian? And okay, I have a friend from India, and this is the Indian culture. Suppose I कहबे कि this is Chinese culture. Chinese माने या पूछंती कि British culture. This is British culture. But when you talk about Indian culture, it's such a it's a salad bowl. There are so many diversity in it. माने इंडियन कहले मोटी कोन बुझिबी, मु पंजाबी बुझिबी, मु मराठी बुझिबी ना, मु बेंगली मानु को रेफर करछि, मु ओडिया मानु कथा कहछि, मु तमिलियंस मानु कथा कहछि, कहा कल्चर कहछि से माने कभी इंडियन फूड. And mostly today the Punjabi culture is very dominant, and Tamilian culture as well. But we as Indians, we do not actually portray or project a non-homogeneous cultural form. And in contrast to the indentured laborers, these Indian migrants of contemporary times, they are more affluent. So, they are affluent, and that's the reason they are also able to make a connectivity with their homeland. जोटा कि previous generation रे हे पारनथला. माने से जो diverse community, से जो diversity टा lose out करि जाउतला. माने अच्छा इंडियन तो से जहाज रे ओटे इंडियन के थिला, से पाखा पाखी से जो भी इंडियन हो, they were able to have the kind of community feeling. Kintu the Indian कहले it's actually a vague thing. When I say, when somebody asks me, do you speak Indian? Indian language amaro nahi. We have so many different languages. There is so much of diversity. So what I'm trying to say that say जो non-homogeneous category ta jota available nathila in the previous generation, because once they left means they left and they were never to come back. से माने आसी पारु नथले आ फेरी पारु नथले तेनु जहा भी हो से माने assimilated आदर हो जाउथले, नहले तांकर से जो identity ta, ethnic identity ta was very difficult to maintain. But the migrants of the contemporary times, they 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 maintain their connectivity with the homeland because they are more affluent than the previous generation. So in terms of marriage, say when I say to Bahabenism, the Gujarati communities, the person will try to find a Gujarati girl back home. The kinship network is also that strong. They will try to bring in more people. Say the out Gujarati community, they will help them out. Property koti bika chalibo, kina chalibo. They will have all their connectivity with their homeland, which was not possible in the previous generation. And you will see that in contrast to USA, those who lived in Britain, they were segregated settlements. But this is the community for Indians. It is Indians ରୁହନ୍ତି, ଏଠି ଖାଲି ଏଇଟା ରୁହନ୍ତି। ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଜିନିଷଟା ତମେ ବ୍ରିଟେନରେ ଦେଖିବ ବେଶୀ ୟୁଏସ୍ ଅପେକ୍ଷା। Majority of the migrants from Indians from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, they lived in ghettos. And the twice migrants, they actually could fare better in terms of business like shopkeeping in Britain. जो माने twice migrants थे, जो माने remember जो माने उगांडा और केन्या रू पुणी migrate है कि ब्रिटेन को आछंती कि कनाडा जाइछंती, they could do well. से माने भलो business रे भलो कले after the second term of migration. And one can also see a lack of ethnic concentration or ethnic neighborhood development of these Asian Indians in America because Hinduism actually plays a limited role here. से जो ethnicity की ethnic identity टा develop करिबारे Hinduism टार एते role नहीं, because if you look at Hindus they don't, it's not a congregational form of religion जेमति Sikhism रहेला कि Christianity रहेले ହେଲା, majority of the migrants are Hindus, and since Hinduism do not vouch for that kind of a congregation, so that's the reason you will not find this kind of neighborhood formation in these countries. And then you will see that one can see institutionalized forms of racism. Racism, it's a fact. Indians till today, they have been racially discriminated. USA kotha kuo, Britain kotha kuo, the racial discrimination is still there, particularly in housing. जदि कोठी घर नबाकू चाहूछ where there are all whites, maybe तमे किछि discrimination face करि परो, so Indians would prefer to be in places जोठी बेसी Indians अछन, so पुरे ghetto formation सेटा ही जाय। ghetto माने I don't mean कि एठी ghetto टा, because okay they would be professionals, they would be having their own, maintaining their own standard of living, but the settlement would be of Indians of the same class and same community. And for social mobility also they would face certain hindrances because as racism has been institutionalized in these parts of the world. And then migration has no doubt led to financial benefit both for the host country and the person who has migrated from his homeland, but at the same time it has led to certain intense emotional tension. Back home, I have my family, I'm not able to meet my family members, the distance is too too great to make a visit regularly. You find different forms of family disorganizations in your homeland. You have divorces coming up, you have you marry, you remarry, you have children who you have abandoned back home. So migration, it's economically it has always been beneficial, and emotionally it has actually one has to pay a price emotionally when it comes to Indian migrants. Now the next form of migration that I was talking about was brain drain. Brain drain today is an old concept. We don't talk about brain drain today, but this term was coined during the 60s and 70s, and this concept was going very strong during this period of time. So brain drain is a phenomena whereby nations lose skilled laborers because they are better paid elsewhere.
it's not only a matter of payment. For example, a scientist who doesn't have enough facility in the homeland, the person is in need, he or she is in need of a better lab. Such a kind of a person would like to move away from, in search of better opportunities and better lab facilities where he or she can continue his or her research. So brain drain, it's not only just monetary wise, but also, in order to pursue your profession, in order to pursue your passion, it takes place often. And this has affected the underdeveloped countries immensely, because they are the ones who are losing out the best of the brains to the developed countries, and it's a brain gain for the developed countries, because they are gaining the best kind of brains because of brain drain. But the underdeveloped countries, they could have used the same brain for the nation building process. एठी आमको से साइंटिस्ट माने जो माने छाड़ी के पढ़ेबे because of brain drain, because से माने facility पाइलेनी कि because से माने सेठी better pay ताकर पे better से माने पैसा पाइबे, for that reason से माने छाड़ी के पढ़ेले जदि से माने एठी थांते मे भी केते कंट्रीब्यूट करि पारथांते हम इकोनॉमी को, हमर साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी रो स्फीयर को. तब it is always, the balance has to be there, brain drain and brain gain. जनक पे gain हिला और जनक पे drain होची. So according to a report that was submitted by UNESCO in 1969, the phenomena of brain drain had the following characteristics: flow of trained and skilled labor from underdeveloped to developed countries. Large number of flow came from, the developing countries than the developed countries. Usually brain drain का developing के underdeveloped to developed हो जाए. It's in a very few cases you will see people migrating from America to settle in India. That doesn't happen, because it's always from developing or underdeveloped to the developed. That's how brain drain takes place. Mostly you will find people in the occupation of engineers, doctors and scientists who are highly professionals. They belong to this, they cater to this form of migration, and the above flow has rapidly increased in recent years. Even recently, a flow ta kaisi बढ़ी जाइए. Higher the skill, greater is the tendency to migrate. केते तम पाखे अधिक स्किल अछि, अधिक नॉलेज अछि, there is a more tendency that तमे migrate करिवो. Then you will see that this flow rapidly responds to changing economic and legislative scenarios. Suppose we are complaining of brain drain. हठात US रा policy change है गला. हठात एबे Trump he came up with certain restriction on certain kind of visas. Key visa का बेनिफिट visa देबेनी. And you will see that the response is seen in the migration trend. हठात migration के बगले जीवो. तो उठोटे out नुआ favorable legislation पड़ी आसला, नुआ law पड़ी आसला. People will start migrating to that policy. Economy और legislation दीटा जाको को नहीं कि ये जो form of brain drain जहाँ विषय में this form of migration we are discussing, it will be saved. Then you will see that the migratory trend, it depends on the education system and utilization of human resources. What kind of education system the home country has, and what kind of education system the host country is seeking. ओ प्रकार एजुकेशन सिस्टम इंडिया रे अछि. जदि इंडिया रे एजुकेशन सिस्टम सतरे ते खराब नै थांता, एते इंडियंस काम पाई न थांते. With such skill and professionalism that we have, the kind of knowledge Indians have, it's really sought after. And in the West, in most of these industrialized countries, they look for Indians. Maybe the reason could be our education system, or it could be underutilization of our human resources. Our human resource को हम ठीक से utilize करी पाउने, कि तांको जितने की benefit मिलिया कथा दे पाउने. That's the reason they are moving out. So it's both way. Host country रो demand कोन, तम supply कोन, तम demand कोन. There is a coherence between that. Then you will say that apart from South America, trend of migration doesn't seem to decrease. Locos चारियाडे migrate କରୁଛନ୍ତି, कोठी ना कोठी जाउଛନ୍ତି. Migration South America रे ଟିକେ कम दिसुची, ता छडा आउ कोठी नाही. All forms of migration सबुठी चलची. This phenomena of brain drain depends both on the push and pull factors in the home and the host countries. होम कंट्री रो एवेन्यूज कोन होम कंट्री केते अपॉर्चुनिटीज दे पारुची होस्ट कंट्री केते अलियोर करि पारुची सेटा काहे के ठेलिला केते डिसएडवांटेजेस होम कंट्री रे अछि आउ होस्ट कंट्री केते हम कोन दे पारुची सो ए दीटा जाको बैलेंस को नै कि ब्रेन टा हुए सो इट्स ऑलवेज द डिपेंड्स ऑन द पुश एंड पुल फैक्टर इन द home and the host countries. Today, the host nation they tag it as brain gain because we say a scientist like Madan Lal Khurana who actually went to in USA and got the citizenship of USA. It was brain drain for us, but it was brain gain for United States of America. Then you will see that there was this Canadian symposium, I think somewhere in sometime in 2000, and they pointed out that today we don't find it as a problem. Today brain drain is not a problem because it used to be a headache for all developing and underdeveloped countries because they believe that we spend so much of resources in training these brains, in creating these brains, and at the end of the day we are left with nothing. से मैंने हमको छाड़ के पढ़ाउछन हम एते सपोज कोटे आईआईटी इंजीनियर पछरे लाख लाख टंका खर्च करूची होते हेलो but at the end of the day the person migrates somewhere else. So the Canadians they started tagging it as brain exchange. They said that okay, some Canadians are moving to the US. तमे US पढ़ौछ तो no problem तमे जाओ, but हमको आहुरी talented immigrants मिल जाउछंती. Canadian जाई परंती किंतु आहुरी talented Indians आसे कि Canadian citizenship नलेनी. So there will be brain exchange. It's no more brain drain. So this very idea and conceptualization of brain drain, brain running down the drain, it's all gone. Today we look at the diaspora in a new way, and we believe that wherever wherever somebody is migrating, wherever there is a case of brain drain, we believe that as I told you in last class, they're like brain banks. They're going to pay back in the coming generations. It's an investment, we believe कि अच्छा गले भी हमारा फायदा, न गले भी फायदा, गले भी फायदा. So we don't use the term anymore. And India is the third largest country as far as the diasporic population is concerned. As I told you earlier also, we Indians, we have traveling genes. We have migration in our genes. We can accommodate, we can adjust, and we can at the same time create our own identity at any new place, wherever you leave us. Kaliki, tome jodi Mars re chhadi dabo, tome jodi Chandra re nei ki chhadi dabo, we Indians will be able to accommodate themselves. So they are the third largest, migrating community, diasporic population in the entire world. And there is another glowing example. There is another community, that is the Chinese, who are a glowing example of this overseas population. Because for a very long period of time, we as Indians and most of the national states, they never looked at the diasporic community in a positive way. They believe that we were applying the same brain drain framework in order to analyze them. But the Chinese diaspora was one who proved to be one that the overseas population, who were the diasporic community of China, who had dispersed themselves across the globe and they were settled in USA, Canada, and Australia and other developed countries, they were actually influential in creating the manufacturing hub back in mainland China. And China actually gave this glowing example to rest of the world that the diaspora, they don't actually, they shouldn't be tagged as brain drain, but it's a brain bank, because they are an investment that we had invested long time back and they are now paying back. So the manufacturing hub that you see in China today, it is because of the diasporic community that China has regained its identity of being a world-class manufacturer. So that's it. Thank you. I would now like to take up some questions. We still have some 7 minutes with us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your nice presentation. So, dear students, Now, if you have any doubts, any query, so please put forth your question to ma'am. Learners, is it the doubt अच्छी मैडम को पचारा? Is it audible to all of you? Learners, अरे किसी तो कुह मैडम मोरे 2 घंटा पढ़ेले
So my lecture has driven you people to silence or what? Any doubts? किछि बुझी पारना? को जिनसारे clarity आउट के दरकार कोठी बुझी हलानी anything you can come up with after you interrupted कि हाँ ओडिया रे कहि भी I tried myself I tried my best to make it bilingual. Next time I'll start it right from the very beginning. तब मते remind कर दबो. Wherever you need to say something, you just interrupt me there. तम सेठी मते रखिया रहिया को कहबो जे मैडम एटा मते ओडिया रे बुझांतु. कि एठो आपण ओडिया रे कोंतु. You are free to do that. क्लासरूम रे जहा करथां तो एठी ठीक सेया करिवो बिकॉज़ कहिला बेलु हटार मो फीडबैक पाउनी ना मु कहा कथा सुनुनी मु लागु छी मु एठी कांथ बाडा संगे गपुची तेनु मु मोर चाली छी तेनु यू हैव टू स्टॉप मी
किसी का डाउट हो जदी पचारा जदी किसी बुझी पारला नहीं if you want to know anything about I mean anything any doubts any question
नो
किसी भी डाउट नहीं so if there is no question will you wind up the session
yes we still have 4 minutes if they don't have any
give some suggestion to ma'am at least how you feel the class tell few words here
ओडिया रे भी कहले चलेबो
अरे किछि तो कुह पिला पिले चलो I mean no issue so with I mean thank you all thank you ma'am for your nice presentation with these words so you are concluding today's session tomorrow same time you will join for the next class thank you very much ma'am thank you for your nice presentation
so tomorrow we will take up block 3 and I will try to again take up the different other diasporic communities and their trends in Indian diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.